Welcome to episode 186 of the Women of the Military podcast. This week, my guest is Danielle de Leon Guerrero. Danielle served in the Air Force, and when she left the military, she felt alone and was looking for a community with women veterans. So she created her nonprofit, Serve Like Her, during the pandemic. And once she connected with other veterans, she began to learn about other women veteran organizations that were able to support her in the work that she was doing. She continues to work to create events that help support the women veteran community. And she also, of course, shared her story of being in the military. So let's get started with this week's interview with Danielle. Welcome to the show, Danielle. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here, Amanda. Thank you.
So let's start with, why did you decide to join the military?
Well, I originally wanted to join the military in my senior year of high school, but I was 17 and my mom wouldn't sign for me to become an aerial gunner at the time is what I wanted to be. It was just past post 9/11. And so I think it freaked her out a little bit. But then I decided to look into it again after meeting a mutual friend of mine I worked with who was already in the military. And she thought I would be a good candidate. So at the age of 20 years old, I joined the delayed entry program for about 6 months. And then I ended up joining 2 days after my 21st birthday. I just was in a stage in my life where I knew I didn't want to work 3 jobs, but I didn't know what I wanted to do in college or what I wanted to do with my life. So I think I went in because I needed something structured, something to keep me occupied.
So instead of going to college, you started working, and you were working lots of jobs, 3 jobs. That's a lot of jobs.
Yeah, I was actually going to college full time at UT San Antonio, but I was kind of in and out of school because obviously I was working too much to pay for school and just was not doing good in my studies.
Yeah, if you're trying to pay for your education and work and go to school, that's and study, it's like, where's time to do all the things? So that makes a lot of sense. And you picked the Air Force, right?
I did. I picked the Air Force for a couple reasons. My great-grandfather was in the Army Air Corps, and we would joke all the time before he passed, if you ever going to decide to go to the military, go Air Force. And I was like, ha, 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 yeah, okay. And so when my friend confronted me, she was in the Air Force, enlisted going officer, and she happened to be in the Air Force. And so it just kind of naturally went that way. I never looked at any other branch.
And so you said you went in right after your 21st birthday, so you were a lot older than a lot of the recruits. What was that like?
Yeah, it was different, to say the least. I was not used to being treated like a baby, basically, because they were like, this is how you pay your bills and you got to do this. And I'm like, I've been living on my own for almost 4 years now. What are we doing? And it was weird because I was always used to being the youngest in the crowd to then kind of feeling like the oldest, like the mom of the group, where girls were coming up to me like, well, how do I do this? And, what comes next? And, how to schedule things. And so that was awkward.
But was it something that you dove into because you felt a responsibility, or did you try and shy away from it?
No, I don't think I shied away from it. I didn't mind it. I've always been kind of the group unofficial leader in everything I do. So I was good with it. It just was weird for me.
That makes sense. So what was your career field?
Sure. When I joined, gosh, it changed several times. I believe it was a 3 Alpha 0X1. So it was information management. So I was in communications. And I shied away from the aerial gunner thing after I talked to my friend, and she talked about opportunities like other bases you could go to, and don't pigeonhole yourself in a career that maybe doesn't have a lot of bases you can be stationed at. And I didn't, again, know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Not that I know now, but it gave me kind of a career choice. And so we landed on information management after taking my ASVAB. So, yeah, I just kind of signed up looking at the binder, the big binder everyone looks at. And I was like, that sounds cool.
And how long was your tech school?
Oh, my gosh, this feels like forever ago. I want to say the tech school was 6 to 8 weeks, because I know I was one of the last flights to have the shorter boot camp, too. So I was at the end of the BDU era.
Okay. So how long was boot camp?
6.5 weeks, I think it was. Yeah.
I was looking at enlisting about the same time that you went into the military, and it was 6 weeks or 6.5 weeks. So maybe I just always thought it was 6 weeks because of that.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I wish I would have known about the ROTC program. I totally would have gone that, because I was 3.5 years in, and that was kind of a bummer to find out after the fact.
Yeah, I just got lucky. My friend and I went to lunch and he was doing ROTC and he was like, before you enlist, let me tell you about this. And I was like, thank you so much for telling me about this because I had no idea. And it was actually, I kept telling the recruiter, I want to go to college, but I want to have a way to help pay for it. And he'd never mentioned ROTC. And I was like, I wish you would have told me I could do this ROTC thing because that's basically what I asked you for. And you didn't even say, oh, there's an option where you can go to college and get your education paid for.
When it's so crazy because they knew I was going to school, because that's why I was in depth for 6 months, is I wanted to get that Airman First Class rank, the E3 rank. So it's like they already knew how far in I was, but nobody ever explained that to me.
That's why I wrote a book,
Yeah.
Girls Guide to Military Service, to help young women and girls like me and you who I could have easily not found out about it, and you didn't find out about it, and it could have changed everything about your whole experience.
Totally agree.
So you went to tech school, and then where was your first assignment?
So tech school was at Keesler. My first assignment was Charleston Air Force Base in South Carolina.
And do you have any highlights or experiences either from basic to your first assignment?
Let's see. For basic, for me, I was never an athletic type. So the running, I was terrified of, and push-ups. It's like, there's no way. I was like the kid that would walk when the coach wasn't like looking at you in gym. And so I thought I was going to die. And I just got with this group of girls that were like, you can do this. And they cheered me on, and I made it somehow. I remember getting like an ingrown toenail like the week before the last run to graduate. And they were like, okay, well, you can either like get kicked back a week and graduate later, or you can run. And I was like, no, I'll run. So I was hobbling along, and, I got it done, and it was all fine. I do remember like one particular moment is when we had the coin ceremony after you graduated, or I think it was the day before you graduated. And you had to do the 3-mile run, like a parade run with all the other flights. And my parents, of course, had come down for my graduation. And that was like the first time I had seen my dad like get emotional. And he finally, for the first time ever, he's never been a very emotional person, said, I'm proud of you. And that was like everything. I like fell apart. Tech school was really fun. I was one of the flights that went to night school. So that was like neat to have a different experience, I think, than some do. I was a green rope. So of course I was leading there too. And that was a fun time. And then I remember when in tech school, during that time, our career field was already doing like a transition between like more administrative to more client support, more computer help desk stuff. And I'd never touched a computer really other than like AOL, which I'm showing my age now. So I was like, I don't know what I got myself into. I'm never going to understand this. And they're like, don't worry, you'll never do CSA work. And then I got to my first duty station. They're like, so you're assigned to the CSA help desk, which was like the big IT help desk for the entire base. And I was like, what? So yeah, that kind of spins you in, I'm sure, to the following questions. But yeah, that made for an interesting first duty location.
Yeah, that's so funny. I was like, oh, AOL, I remember. So you didn't really know a lot about computers, and they were like, don't worry about it, you'll be fine. And then they're like, you're going to be helping people with computer problems. And you're like, I don't think that's who you want to be helping you. So did you have someone who helped train you, or how did you get through that job, and what did you learn from it?
Sure. So luckily I had a really good supervisor, and she was a staff sergeant at the time. And she was like, don't worry, like, we won't set you up for failure. You'll have like time to be able to get acclimated to all the things. But I was already nervous. So like the first day I show up and they're talking us through how to image a computer, like basically load it with programs. And that was my job for like a good solid few months. It was very monotonous and pretty boring. And then I started asking questions like, hey, can I answer the phone? What do I, like, is there a script I can read from? Of course, there wasn't like a script you could read from. And I always tell people that get into the IT field now, my first story of my first like help desk call. I think it was a colonel at the time, call me frantic because he's like late to a meeting. He's trying to print something and he's like, it's not printing. Yeah, we're here 30 minutes ago and you said it was fixed. And he's rambling on the phone and I'm just like little scared airman, like, sir. And I panicked and I said, sir, did you read the manual? And I just hung up the phone. I told my sergeant what happened and she was like, you did what? So here I am still doing communications this many years later. So, not too much to worry about, but I definitely had a lot to learn. And my first duty station was all about that. I ended up excelling and I pinned Staff Sergeant on right at the end of my first enlistment. So at my 4-year mark, really enjoyed doing the help desk, working with people on understanding how to train them and communication, issues with IT things. I worked for the base commander several times. And even when we went to Joint Base, I was their IT person. So, and then got to run one of our small flights, the knowledge operations side, which was like the records management side. So it was what was the saying they always said, like master of, what is that saying? Like a trait, I don't know, like master of none. I can't think of it right now. Our career field was like super broad. So it went from like administrative work, like printing out awards and medals, to like working on getting someone's email fixed or a printer resolved or configured. So it was like super broad. It was a lot to cover.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to hear how much you learned and how you went from being, I don't know anything, and then and even like your first phone call, I don't know, read the manual, good luck, bye, to actually like leading and helping people and learning more about you didn't just give up. You weren't like, oh, I'm a failure, I hung up on that colonel. You kept going, you answered the phone again, and you were able to help people and learn from it. So it just shows how much the military can give you opportunities, especially in areas that you may be like, I don't know how to do any of this stuff.
For sure.
So did we miss anything from your time at Charleston that you wanted to talk about before we move on to your next assignment?
Sure. The big thing we didn't talk about was my deployment.
Where did you deploy to and what were you doing?
So I was really fortunate. I only had to deploy once, and that was to Balad, Iraq. And it was at the end of Operation Iraqi Freedom and the beginning of New Dawn. So that would have been 2010.
And what was Iraq like at that time? Was there still a lot of incoming fire for the bases, or had it cooled off at all?
I feel like when I arrived in like late April, early May, it wasn't super hot as far as like incoming fire and things like that. But when Ramadan kicked off, which now I can't even remember what month that was, it was like really active. I remember thinking like, oh, okay, this is a little bit more than I remember at the beginning. And you asked me what I did. I completely didn't answer. I worked for the drawdown office, which was created as part of the drawdown in Iraq. So my job was to go out with a young Army private to all of the different flights and squadrons and units. And I had to basically handwrite on reports how much ammo they had, how many people, what fob did they come from, how many connexes did they have. And this is for like all the contractors and stuff. And then I would go back and I'd have to manage that in a database to report to the 4-star so they could kind of figure out, the plan, if you will, on how to get out and really have an accurate count of who was on base, which was really crazy to even think of at that time.
Yeah, that's kind of a crazy job to think about, like all the logistics that go into it. And how did you did you go to the FOBs or
No, I didn't go to the FOBs. I think maybe one of my predecessors did. Luckily, I think they only had 2 other FOBs at that time that were still had people there, but people were showing up, units were coming out of nowhere. They didn't actually have a good count, to be honest, of who was there because people were just coming in from everywhere and contractors were just flooding in. And so I would just go out across the entire base on both sides and just document that information and report that up.
That doesn't really surprise me after being in Afghanistan, because when we would go on missions, we would go and stay at different COPs sometimes when we got stuck at different places, and it was just a little tiny combat outpost with people at it and a few outhouses and tents, and then there was a base, and then there was another one a couple of miles down the road, and there was all this stuff. And I'm sure that, and I was with the French, so there were French forces, American forces, and they were probably everything mismanaged.
Exactly.
And I'm sure
we had Australians there too. The Aussies were there, like you said. The French were there. There was Army, there was Navy. It was just we're just all thrown in this blended base, and everyone's just scrambling around trying to do whatever their mission is to do to get it done as fast as possible.
Yeah, that sounds really crazy. And you also were a mom when you were deployed. So what was it like to leave your child behind, and how did you stay connected, or were you able to stay connected?
Yeah, sure. So I always like to tell like young women when they're joining about like this could happen, even if like oh, I'm not going to have any kids, which is of course what I said. And then I ended up becoming pregnant a few months after I got married. And I had my baby in my oldest daughter, May of 2009. And I was deployed that very next, like less than a year later. And I had asked for like months, like, I want to get deployed. And they're like, nah. And then as soon as I got pregnant, they were like, so you're getting deployed. And I was like, what? And so it was a really like crazy moment because I guess before that point, I was just like, oh, this is a cool career, cool job. It's got good perks. And then it became like really real. Like, okay, the Air Force like comes first. They care about us, but they don't, it's not like, oh, she just had a baby, we're going to let it slide. So that was difficult to come to terms with. I think I was pretty much in denial up until the very end. I remember even like trying to bypass some vaccinations and like they caught me when I got there. But I deployed like right before her first birthday. So we celebrated her first birthday early to try to kind of like, I guess, make myself feel better. Like I wasn't really missing anything, but of course it's not the same. My daughter ended up staying with my parents because her father was still a cop on base. And so he was working different shifts. So since she was in school, we sent her home. And I remember telling my mom, how is she going to remember me? She's probably not going to remember my voice. I'm going to miss all the first, all her, first steps, first haircut, first words, like all those things. And I remember being at the Hallmark store, and that's when like the books first became really popular to record. So you could record your voice by reading a book. And so I got like All the Ways I Love You the Most, I think it was what it was called. I have it in the closet still. But I recorded my voice reading this book to her and made my mom promise to like open it and read it with her every night so that she would hear my voice. So that was like my big way of trying to get that connection. And then my mom would continue to do like, I'll do Skypes whenever you need to. And you have this whole plan and then you get there and you're like, yeah, that's not really how that works. You get like maybe one day off if you're lucky. And then you're doing laundry, right? You're fighting people for washers or how to do any of your things. And so sometimes the service was just bad, or we'd have direct fire and, I'm like hiding under a table trying to talk to my kid. So it definitely was a challenge, but I'm glad that I deployed in a time where we at least had some kind of, face-to-face interaction.
Well, I was at a tiny fob, and we had the laundry room was right outside where I worked. And so I would be at work and I would go put a load of laundry in, and then a timer would go off and we would walk over. And so that was nice. And it wasn't ever full, so we didn't have to like fight with people.
Oh my gosh. So I know we're getting a little off topic here, but when I first got there, we only had a tent, and I wasn't an NCO then. So I was still in like a bay with 10 other women in my direct room. And it was so hot in there because it's a freaking tent. It's already hot as it is. And you had to sit like on your washer so people wouldn't just throw your clothes out like mid wash. And then God forbid you were late, like your stuff was just on the dirt and you'd have to do it all over again. So then when I think our AC or something, we were fortunate because I worked for the mission support group commander. So we were fortunate to be in a nicer building. Well, I kept having electrical problems throughout my deployment, and another unit finally left so that we could inherit their building. Well, their building had a washer and dryer in it. So I was like, we have struck the lottery. So then I got to finally like the last month to do my laundry during work, which was great. But I feel you on the laundry front.
It's kind of funny, like the things that are like really important when you're deployed. It's like, how am I going to get my laundry done? Like here at home, you don't think about it. Or like, even if you go to like a laundromat, there's usually not a fight over like.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. And another thing that you were talking about how you left before your daughter was a year old, and the military has recently changed in the last 5 years how quickly moms have to deploy after they have kids. And so now you get a full year after you have a baby.
Shut up. Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. That is really awesome.
They also extended maternity leave from 6 weeks to 12 weeks.
I did not know that. That needed to happen for sure. Because I remember I had a really hard time with my delivery and I didn't heal well from my C-section that had to happen. And I ended up like basically breaking open like my wound from the C-section. And then they wanted me to, the doctor was like, well, you need to stay on maternity leave longer to let it heal. But of course, the Air Force was like, we don't care if you had a C-section, like you'd still need to do your fitness test. And so like I kept ripping the like gosh, what is it called? Not the wound, but like the cut open every time I was doing sit-ups and stuff. So it just elongated this whole physical training process. And it's really hard to like breastfeed and do all that stuff and still feel like yourself and basically just pick up where you left off, even though you're a completely different person, like mind, body, soul.
Yeah, they've made a lot of changes. And even when my first and second son were born, my husband got 10 days of paternity leave. And the Air Force now gives men like 6 weeks and women get 12 weeks. And it's like, that's just crazy. Like how much it's changed. And it's, my son's not even 10 and my youngest is only 6. So like there's been a lot of changes in the last 5 years to make it better for families.
That's good to hear. Definitely.
Yeah. So that's a good thing that's changed for the military. That makes it easier to be a mom because you know you can be home for the first year. You can choose to leave before if you want to, but you have the option to defer it if you need to. And so I think it's important to talk about that. So what was coming home from the deployment like? You said she was with your parents, and then how were they there when you got home, or did you have to go and get her? How did that all work?
Yeah, so I came home like, I want to say it was like the day before Veterans Day or day after, I can't remember, in November of 2010. And she came back like a month early with basically her grandma on her father's side. So my mother-in-law was taking care of her for that last month. And so they all three met me at the airport, plus a few people that I was stationed with from my base that had come home before me. And I just remember being like really nervous, like, is she going to remember me? Like, I know we had talked and like, you know, they don't say a lot. They're one, you know, and I hadn't seen her walking. I just really didn't know what to expect. And so I told my friend, like, can you just give me a minute, like stand here with me. I just want to like see her before she sees me so I could like gather myself. And I remember her like sitting there, and luckily my ex-husband got this on video, but I remember seeing her there and she has like her little welcome home mommy poster. And I was like a hot mess before I even turned the corner. And I saw her and she saw me, and we kind of just looked at each other, and she just walked up to me and gave me a hug like nothing had ever happened. And I was like, she remembers me, you know, but she was just like this tiny little toddler, and she was walking, and I don't know, like I didn't know any of her interests, like her favorite snacks and stuff, but I remember feeling like overwhelmed with happiness and like feel like I could take a deep breath for the first time. Like, all right, like you made it through it, and now you get to, you know, be with your family again. So that was definitely a great moment in time for sure.
And then like right after you got back, you guys were already moving to the next place.
Pretty much, yeah. I was in the middle of Airman Leadership School. Like I pinned on Staff Sergeant, went to Airman Leadership School, and then we got orders to Alconbury, England. And, you know, he couldn't get medically cleared to go. And so I didn't want to go unaccompanied because I was like, I just got back. Like, what do you mean you want me to leave for like 3 years? Like, yes, we get to come back every now and then, but I'm not doing that. As cool as the assignment was, I didn't want to do that. So I turned that down, and we got orders to Little Rock Air Force Base. So I was like, wah, wah, like what's in Little Rock, right? But, you know, it ended up being my favorite PCS, my favorite duty station for active duty. So
yeah, let's talk about what was it about? Because you think Little Rock, which is in Arkansas, and people probably are like, how is that your favorite? And so tell us what you liked about it so much and how it ended up being your favorite base.
Yeah, so Little Rock Air Force Base, of course, like most at least Air Force people know, it's like the Herc C-130 land. So I was like, okay, well, what am I going to be doing here? I actually was happy that I was still going to be doing the communications IT side of my career field because, again, they were splitting us off to kind of help with the personnelist, more administrative side, which I wasn't as happy with. But so I knew I was going to be in a one deep slot, and so that was going to be a challenge. And then when I reported for duty, everybody was gone. They were TDY. And so I got introduced just to my first sergeant, who was actually in the process of retiring and being a contractor there afterwards. So he kind of gave me the lowdown. He was like, so I know that you've been in support all these years as communications. Now you're in the ops world. It's like a whole different like culture and everything. And so I was a little intimidated. On top of that, there was only like less than 20 enlisted because we worked for our squadron, 20th Weapons Squadron, was a geographically separated unit from Nellis. So we basically were the enlisted were support for the C-130 weapons school. And they were transferring from, I believe, what were the H models to the J models. Like they kind of still had a mix. And so my job was to basically prepare all of the laptops, all of the IT equipment needed, both NIPRNet and SIPRNet, on class for their mission planning. When we would go TDY like every few months. We would be gone to Nellis, of course, and to Colorado Springs, Colorado, which beautiful. That was my favorite. And I would set up like mini networks and help them with anything they had issues with during mission planning. I would help Intel a lot, supporting them to make sure that they could get all of their presentations up for all of these mock exercises and things so that when the C-130 graduates graduated, they were able to have all of the knowledge they needed to be able to, to fly in all these different types of situations. And so I really got to be like taken under the wing by the ops side of the Air Force, which I was really happy to experience in retrospect. I got to fly with them on the C-130s, like strapped over there, like near the ramp, and go to the drop zone at night and help them with all that stuff in the pitch black and see them jumping out of the planes, and just really cool like stuff that normally I think the support side doesn't see. And also they don't get the experience of like how we all piece together, like why what we do matters for them. And so I do really commend like the people I served with at that squadron to help me understand like why it was so important to have a support and ops side and what made it so great when we worked together. So they never made me feel like I was out of the club, because I was like, oh, I'm not a flyer and they're going to hate on me. And I'm the only girl, in a small squadron of about 45. So yeah, it was a really cool situation, once in a lifetime. I loved all of the civilians that I worked with. They were all prior military too. So I had a civilian counterpart that really took me under his wing too, to show me a lot of just career-wise things I could use after the military as well.
Yeah, that sounds like so interesting, because a lot of times when you hear about people who work in comm, you think about the mission support side and you don't hear about the ops side. So that's really cool to see. I understand like how mission support supports the mission from the mission support side, but like there's also a role that is played on the ops side, which is really cool because I don't think enough people know about how the two intersect and why they're so important.
Definitely. I would highly recommend any kind of, opening for that type of thing if you're in the support field or vice versa. I think it really gives you the full spectrum of what the Air Force does best.
Yeah. And you said that you were already a mom when you transferred there. So what was it like to be a mom and going TDY and one man or one woman deep? So was it a lot of hours? What was that experience like of being a mom and serving in the military?
Yeah, so I had my first daughter in 2009, and then I deployed in 2010 for 7 months to Iraq. And then we got our orders not too long after we got back. And so at that time, my husband was working for security forces as one of the air provosts, civilian cops. And we thought oh, this is great. Anywhere I transfer to, he'll be able to transfer too. Well, it doesn't really work like that, like most things in the military. And the sequestration happened, I think, which was in Obama's first term. So I got my orders. We were okay, we're going from Air Mobility Command to Air Mobility Command. So that should be pretty easy. No, they didn't have any spots for him. So I actually had to PCS with my daughter before him for about 3 to 4 months so that he could continue to get a check, right? Because we couldn't really afford for him to stop working. So I reported my first duty station by myself, don't know anyone, young mom, and find out automatically, yo, you're going TDY in 2 months. And I was like, what? So that was a frantic thing. I had to bring in family, bring in my parents, can you take my daughter? Luckily, she wasn't in school yet. So it was easier to send her back home to Texas, which wasn't too far away. But it was an adjustment because I wasn't used to not coming home every day to her. Even if I had days I worked late and stuff previously, I always got to see her every day. And so it was exciting because I was excited for the new experience and to be like in this ops world, but then also like tore at my heartstrings when I would like not be able to be there to drop her off at daycare or, not talk to her as much as I would like to and see her.
Yeah, I think you touched on all the challenges that women sometimes face in the military, especially like if their spouse is a civilian or even if you're dual military and you can't get signed together. There's like so many challenges and dynamics, and it's like the mission still goes. And you're like, wait, I still have to figure everything out. They're like, no, we're going TDY. You got to figure it out. You got to come up with that family care plan. And sometimes that's really hard.
Well, and I think that's why like military to military that we get so close is like I leaned really heavily on another couple that we were friends with. He was a cop and then his wife was prior Air Force, but she was out and they had a daughter. And so we became very close. And I was like, can you like pick her up from the CDC because he doesn't get off of his night shift and I have to be on, on the Herc leaving. Like, can you just like watch her for a few hours until his shift's over? So I think that's why we get so close because we really just don't have any choice. You kind of just create your own family and try to rely on them as best as you can.
Yeah, I remember my first week here, they were in Virginia. They were like, who's your emergency contact? I'm like, well, I know this person who lives down the street from me. Maybe they could be it.
I agree.
And then you move and you have to do it all over again. And you make friends really fast because you're like, can you be my emergency person? And they're like,